Well, 2017 is almost over, and that means I have another year of racing in the bag. In 2017, I made it to 1 Rallycross event, 8 autocross events, 2 autocross schools, 1 drag strip, and about 3,000 street miles on the car. Here's a look back at the abuse my poor car endured this past year through all of that. The racing season got off to an early start in February as I took the M3 to a Rallycross with Iowa Region in Benton, Iowa. I've been to this location before, and the soil was really sandy, cars sunk hard and fast in the turns, and in the straights, and in the paddock. Since it was February, we were hoping for a snowy course or at least frozen ground, but a hot spell the week before the event ensured that all of the ground was totally thawed out and ready to suck up some cars. I put the M3 up on stock springs for the winter in order to gain a little extra ground clearance, and I knew I needed every inch I could get on this course. I started the day by trying to park in the paddock, where my bliss axe immediately sunk into the sand and the car bottomed out. Not a good sign. The back end of the course was a turn into a muddy uphill section, and I found that I had trouble keeping my momentum up in that area. If the car slowed down too much, it stopped and wouldn't move at all. In an amazing display of driver skill, I managed to get stuck on 3 of my 6 runs. On the runs that went well, I ended up crawling up the hill in second gear with the accelerator on the floor, the car barely inching its way up the hill. On my last run, I went wide and plowed the front bumper into a berm, pushing the radiator hose into the water pump pulley and sawing a hole right through it, emptying the engine of its coolant. After getting dragged back to the paddock, I managed to find a piece of copper pipe on the ground that fit my busted hose and got it installed with the help of a few spectators, and I drove the car home. After that event, I redid the entire front end of the car. I pulled the unused AC condenser and tossed it, and I got a brand new radiator and fan with the inlet and the outlet on the correct side so that I could route the coolant hoses much more safely. Between the radiator, reinstalling the H&R lowering springs, and fitting up the new lightweight 17x9 wheels, the car was barely ready in time for the Des Moines Valley region's solo school at the end of March. In classic Iowa fashion, after a 65 and sunny February Rallycross, we had a 38 and rainy day for our solo school. Instead of potentially hardening my RE71R autocross tires by letting them get below 45 degrees, I ran my bliss axe for the school. Even so, the car received universal praise from the instructors regarding the car's setup, grip, and behavior, and I was credited with the fastest ride of the day. Sitting in my car in wet jeans in 40-degree weather really made me wish the driver's seat heater worked. On the plus side, the new radiator performed flawlessly, and the car's engine barely creeped above 180 degrees all day. The next day was the first full event of the season, and my first time running my 245 with RE71R's front and rear. Adventureland lends itself to some really interesting course designs, as the course was hot between several connected parking lots. I laid down a 41.4 on my 4th run that I couldn't top for the rest of the day, and that was good for first in XP and 12th out of 102 cars overall. My biggest takeaway was that my rear fenders badly needed rolling. The rear tires rubbed at every turn. It was only a little bit terrifying. After that event, the car sat for a few weeks, so I threw the kids' car seat in back and spent a week driving it to work just to make sure all the bugs were worked out before the racing season kicked into high gear. Well, the bug did pop up one day when I found brake fluid on my shoes. Turns out the Willwood clutch master cylinder I had installed was pretty badly side-loaded, and the aluminum plunger wore until it leaked. Fortunately, I had a spare master cylinder on the shelf and was able to steal its plunger. I made sure everything was much better aligned, and hopefully this one lasts a little bit longer. The April DMVR event ended up getting rained out, so my next event was in May with Nebraska Region. On Saturday, the 4th of May, the Nebraska Region hosted an SCCA starting line school, where instructors work with novices to introduce them to autocross and help hone skills. My instructors were John Hunter and Tamara Hunt, both SCCA solo national champions and excellent teachers. We swapped seats and the instructors had a chance to drive the students' cars. Again, lots of compliments about how fun the car was to drive. Turns out a hacked-together E36 with a torquey V8 is a blast when you're swerving around some cones. Near the end of the day, after several consecutive laps through the course, the M3's coolant started to get pretty hot. I'm talking over 250 degrees pretty hot. And also the front right brake was dragging badly. Immediately after the day was over, I ran to the auto parts store and miraculously found a caliper rebuild kit in stock for $11, and then found myself in the hotel parking lot replacing the ill-advised bronze caliper slide bushings with stock rubber parts. The next day was a normal Nebraska Region event. The The course was set up at the Lincoln Airport, an incredible expanse of beautiful flat concrete where the national level competitions are held. I pulled up that venue on Google Maps and was actually able to fit all 4 of DMVR's venues inside the sea of concrete that Nebraska gets to play with every month. Building off the previous day's instruction, and with a car that's no longer dragging the brakes, I had a really good day. On my 5th and final run, I laid down a 62.3, which was good for first in XP in a massive field of 2 cars, and just 50 thousandths behind another E36 M3 that was prepped for the STR class, with the same tires I was running, similar suspension work, and a little more weight loss. Once I was home, I took a look at the cooling fan and discovered that though I had wired the new fan to turn the correct direction, the blades were installed backwards and weren't pushing air through the radiator. I swapped it around and immediately saw an improvement in the car's ability to cool down in hot weather. The next event came quickly, and I headed out to Oskaloosa Airport on May 21st. This course became known as Conepocalypse for all the cones people were hitting. Among my 8 runs that day, I managed to nail 15 cones, more than 4 times as many as I hit in all of 2016. My 4th run was my fastest at 47.6, good enough for first in XP and 15th of 51 overall. Just 2 weeks later, I found myself preparing for the June event at the Iowa Event Center.
Jesus, this thing's loose.
The day before the race, I jacked up the car for a general pre-race inspection. When your car is this much of a POS, it's important to regularly check and see if anything else has fallen off. Now, I noticed the engine and driveline vibrations had gotten worse since Lincoln, and I was afraid that something was off in the drive shaft or the engine mounts. I was right. Both engine mount bolts on the driver's side had snapped off, and the engine was sitting down on the subframe. No wonder I felt vibrations. I was able to extract the remaining threads by welding a nut onto each of them. Then I installed new bolts. Vibration gone. The Iowa Event Center is a tight venue, and my car usually does well here as I'm given ample opportunity to tap into my V8 grunt for pulling out of corners and up the slight hills. The highlight of my day was definitely the super sick but ultimately slow drift through the last 2 corners on one of my runs. My 3rd one was a 48.7, good enough for first place in XP and 10th out of 65 overall. July holds the annual Iowa Challenge event where each region in Iowa is pitted against each other over 2 days on 2 different courses. Day 1 was a fast course. I found myself on the rev limiter in second at least 2 different places, and I topped out at about 66 miles an hour. My time of 40.1 was good enough for first place in XP and 17th of 64 overall. Day 2 was a much different course with absolutely 0 straight sections. Everything was a turn, and picking a perfect line was paramount to get in a fast time. I never managed to make it click, and I ended up 2nd in XP and 27th out of 72 overall. August put us back at the event center, and as usual, the M3 loved it. Conditions were perfect for good grip and good racing, and my 43.8 was good enough for first in XP and 8th out of 66 overall, my best raw finish to date. I decided to start off September with something a little bit different. I headed up to Cedar Falls Motorsports Park to celebrate an American tradition, going fast in a straight line for a quarter of a mile. Some quick calculations told me that the stock Explorer engine in place my car should be somewhere in the 14s, but I wanted to know exactly where. My night started off with runs in the high 14s as I worked on my launch technique. Partway through the evening, the car developed a misfire below 2,000 RPM, but since I don't need to be below 2,000 RPM for drag racing, I went ahead and sent it. My best run of the night ended up being a 14 flat at 96 miles an hour. Not bad for a stock junkyard Explorer engine. I try as I might, I could not break into the 13s, and I tried. Hard launches, power shifts, totally putting in jeopardy having a functional car at the end of the night to take me home. 14.0 puts me on par with a stock M3, but don't worry, a cam swap will change that very fast. The next weekend I hit up Iowa Speedway for DMVR's September autocross event. The autocross course started on the track's road course with a long straight. I managed to hit 65 miles an hour by the end of that, then proceeded to make its way through the infield with some twist turns and a couple of tricky but fun elements. My best time of 49.0 was good for first in XP and 14th out of 80 overall. Now, the whole season I'd been on the verge of being fast, so in an effort to gain a competitive advantage, I decided to be a better driver. Haha, just kidding, I got slicks. I pulled my RE71Rs off and mounted a set of lightly used Hoosier A7s. Now, of course, the last event of the season was in late October, meaning temperatures were in the low 40s. The slicks were not happy. The character of these new tires was totally different from what I was used to. They broke loose and hopped, the understeer was much more sudden and much less recoverable than it was with the street tires. They didn't seem to get up to temperature all morning, and when they finally did get warm in the afternoon, I felt like I was way down on grip compared to what I had with the Bridgestones. And plus my misfire came back with a vengeance, but this time it happened randomly throughout the rev range. The day did not go well. At the end of one of my runs, I heard a terrible screech coming from the front of the car and feared that I lost a wheel bearing. Fortunately, it was just a rock stuck between the brake rotor and the backing plate. When I had the wheels off to check that out, I realized the new slicks were rubbing on the struts pretty badly, but luckily I had some 5mm spacers with me that were able to solve that problem. Overall, my performance for the day was pretty disappointing. I finished with at least a full second behind guys I'd been running neck and neck with all season. My 49.9 put me at 19th out of 91 overall and second place in XP. At the close of the season, I ended up with a first place trophy in my class and dead last in packs. That's the beauty of running in XP, the class where anything goes as long as your car probably used to be a road car. Now, to be really competitive in XP, I'd need to add probably 400 more horsepower. I would need to lose probably 1,000 pounds, and I would probably need to find some slicks about twice as wide as I'm running. Oh yeah, and I'd probably need enough aero to make a 747 jealous. Now, all of that work hardly seems worth it on a 20-year-old BMW with a salvage title, so instead, I pretend PAX doesn't exist. On the plus side, the car's finally running reliably, and by reliably I mean that I at least haven't had to tow it home this year. So the goal for next year is just to keep it reliable so I can keep getting beat by stock Miatas.